Hey guys, what's up? This is Lee from Complexity, and you're watching the esports historian Thorin's YouTube channel.
Jose Mourinho, very quick detail I'll give people here in case you're not aware of it. The difference between Portuguese and Spanish countries, by the way, is in a Spanish country, someone whose name is like his would be Jose, like with an H pronunciation. If you're from Portugal or Brazil, you say Jose, hence Jose Aldo in MMA, as opposed to Jose Aldo if he'd been Mexican or something similar. So Jose Mourinho has a legendary interview when he was at Manchester United, where even though I thought he did one of the best jobs ever, famously, some people were critical of him and he was doing a lot of press work, and he explained this concept of football heritage, or heritage as he says. Now, for people who don't know, Jose Mourinho, maybe the best football manager / coach ever in history. Certainly there'd be other people in the category, Alex Ferguson, Pep Guardiola. Now, you're not going to stop there because you're young little pleb nephews. I'd obviously have like my man Fabio Capello, Ancelotti. There's some pretty good people to put in that category, but Johan Cruyff. But he's one of the best coaches of all time. And one of the interesting things he explained in this concept of football heritage was essentially, notice even though people think he's mega arrogant, he didn't essentially just sort of say, it's all just me. If there's just me there, that's what makes us win. He was actually essentially trying to argue almost the opposite. What he was trying to explain was that you have to gradually build up sort of what the actual realistic expectations are for a club. You have to build up the culture of the club so people have a winning mentality and a right attitude, and they play the right way and play for each other and don't skive in practice. Then you've got to build up the idea of like winning in terms of we've actually won championships. Like when you play for this team, you're playing for Manchester United or the Patriots in American football, the Lakers. You're playing for some team with heritage and a history. You've been champions in the past. It's not good enough just to be good. You've got to be winners. You also want to build up things like the expectations. Once people have been in legendary clubs like Juventus or something, then they don't just consider it, hey, I'm in a good team, maybe we do well. No, you join a team like that, you're supposed to win. If you join Real Madrid, you're supposed to win. If you join the all-time greatest teams, there's an expectation there that you continue on a lineage, a heritage that you're sort of gaining, inheriting, taking on through being a part of that project, of that team, of that company. And that's no small matter. That's why I understand why he was bringing this up for Man United, because people were talking at the time like Man United was old Man United 10 years earlier with Alex Ferguson, as though essentially Jose Mourinho had just gotten those players and now he's failing where they'd succeeded. Whereas what he was trying to explain was, look at all the years when he wasn't a part of their team. Look where they were placing in the Champions League, in the biggest competitions. How were they doing? They were actually a somewhat busted up team at that point in time. That's why he had to come in and be the saviour. Meanwhile, if you're in a team like, I mean, the funny thing is, he himself set this up in Chelsea, didn't he? They were champions after he left because he helped establish something. By the way, Real Madrid, he actually, if you go look at some of the players he signed, he didn't get to win those Champions Leagues with them, but some of those key players actually were under his tenure. You think about some of the other teams he was in. Essentially, in even his most successful teams, he's not a pure miracle worker. He had to have time and the right pieces and ideally some sort of heritage to actually inherit himself. That's when it's going to be best of all. Not when you're going there and basically having to start from scratch and just build up from zero with all this stuff. Because it's going to take you longer. It might even cost you more money. And it's certainly not going to be as easy as if you walk in the door with a team loaded with pieces that can already win today. Maybe they've already been winning, and then it's your job continue winning or win today. That's a totally different order, even though it's not necessarily that one's totally easier than the other. It's just one requires a very certain skill set and one requires perhaps a totally different skill set. So to me, I think actually when you look at this is a very meaningful concept for Counter-Strike. I would say for all esports, but nowadays I don't put it on all the Reddits and people just say it's not relevant to the other games. So I'm just going to say Counter-Strike for this one, my native game, because I actually think this is a really useful lens when we're judging new squads, as in when someone makes a player change, especially I think for in-game leader and coach, this is where this applies. I want to use this lens when I'm judging this team before I've seen them play, when I'm only seeing their first games, because I think it's actually a very interesting brand new analytical lens. Because when you're looking at a squad, an obvious example of this, like the most extreme, would be something like the new Na'Vi squad. The new Na'Vi squad has two players who've played together before. They have Simple and Bit, but they're not speaking in Russian anymore, so they're also not communicating in the language they even played in before. And they're now playing with 100% non-Ukrainian teammates, except for each other, and in English, and with a Finnish IGL. So they've changed so many factors in their team. The only things that stay the same is Blade's the coach, and then Simple and Bit of teammates. That's it. But aside from that, it's such a totally new squad with so many ambitious elements to it that I don't think you can look at that squad and look at the first tournament and go, well, it didn't do that well, it's busted, it's never going to work. No, they're starting from zero essentially. Now they've got a mega piece in terms of Simple and a pretty good piece in terms of Alexi B, and still having Blade is mega. They've got some nice pieces, but all the past heritage of Na'Vi lineups and the great lineups they had and the style of play they had, all that stuff to some degree is out the window. Blade gets to keep a little bit of it, but then think how many players aren't up to speed, haven't been reading all those big dossiers that he was given to the former teammates that aren't in the squad anymore. It's going to take, that's why he's actually been trying to temper expectations and tell you it's going to take months and months and months to get fully up to steam and to get to the peak level. Meanwhile, if you go look on the other side of the equation, what about the most obvious one that made me think of this, was Glaive when he got the Astralis lineup in 2016. So what happened was, because they failed a couple of events, karrigan was fired by Zonic and Astralis. They recruited Glaive. No other player changes were made. Immediately, the team was in the semi-final of the next LAN, the final of another LAN after that, then won a LAN, then went and won the major. These was like the first 4, 5, 6 LANs we're talking about here, by the way. So in that scenario, did Glaive build up the foundation of Astralis that core? No, of course he didn't. I mean, by the way, technically, karrigan didn't entirely. Like, karrigan originally got it from Fetish, where you had the basics at like a semi-level. Then karrigan took them to finals and won championships, but couldn't win the big one. And then Glaive took over, and he got to take all of that and all the synergies, and they'd played together for years, and they had a tactical base with Fetish. Then they went for like a little bit more in the middle when they had karrigan, and now they're going to a bit more tactical. All this stuff was there. That doesn't make it easy. Look, only Glaive did this in Counter-Strike history, but he had a very different task from karrigan building that squad up from what he got from Fetish. Now, let's go back again. On the other side, so there's other extreme examples you can give. Like, I think that's why Snappy deserves insane credit for what he's done with ENCE. Because when you go and look when he joined ENCE, that mishmash international roster they had initially, by the way, most of those players aren't the ones that are really good in ENCE now. Most of those players are gone. He got that lineup, already got them to a competent level. Then he lost his star player that he built the whole style of the team around and give all the resources to. So he had to get a different star player with a different style of play. Nuts is nothing like Spinks, by the way. Obviously, Sun Pius' open game's very different from the Hades in terms of what they need, what resources. So he's twice built from scratch as far as I'm concerned. World championship contender lineups. That's insane. Like, that's incredible. Like, Snappy himself is establishing a heritage there that the joke is, if he did go to a bigger squad, you potentially could bring in another good IGL, another good Danish one especially, and they could actually pick up some of the things he was already doing and do something with it. Like, they've already got the pieces and a solid way of playing and expectations and an understanding of what it takes to actually get to the... All these things are there now, but they weren't there when Snappy arrived. Then let's go to the other side. What about when my boy Daps used to build up those squads, one of the best ever at building teams from scratch, by the way, and who would come in and get all the credit by winning? Good old Stan, aka Stanislaw. So it happened in Optic, then it happened in NRG. These squads get built up. The other players, the other stars even, are scouted by Daps. He builds the team, he builds the chemistry, he builds the synergies, the map pools, the style of play. He even often would bring in the bloody coach. And then what would happen is they'd kick him out, bring in Stanislaw, and then they'd have that usual, 3 to 4 months where you have this crazy honeymoon period because he's already essentially inherited everything he needs to win. He wins really early on, then it just drops off a cliff to nothing and he never himself can build it back up again. Stanislaw can't build, but at the same time, Daps couldn't win the same way with the team. Daps is really good at building. Stanislaw's really good at saying, thanks, take that, and then winning with it, but only in the short term. I mean, I often have this analogy I've used before, which goes, it's like the jam jar / pickle jar phenomenon, right? Where you could struggle really and get a pickle jar almost opened, and then if someone else comes and goes, give me a go on that, it might pop straight open for them. That doesn't actually mean they're like significantly stronger than you, because maybe you did most of the work and then they just got the last bit off. Now that's not the same as saying you didn't do anything. Maybe you couldn't get it off at the end. Maybe that was your issue, and maybe they couldn't have done the first part, but they could pop it off at the end. I actually don't know technically how grip strength works and if the jam jar analogy works in that one, but you get conceptually what I'm saying here. Also, by the way, as an aside, there's the whole in-game leader hangover effect, is that to consider too. But let's go back a second. In terms of the idea of of getting a lineup essentially from nothing, or building the heritage and the expectations and the level and finding the star and crafting the roles. I think that in theory is the hardest approach. It's why those are the people I have a lot of respect for. People like the Dapses, the Snappies, the MSLs, the Karrigans of the world, who've just taken on these projects, Alexi B even, and they've just started from nothing and they've been building it up and they're trying to establish what is our style, what is our style of play, who is going to be our stars, what are the roles, what we're going to do over here. And then they hope eventually they get good enough players. And if you're lucky and you are a snappier account, maybe one day you get to go to the absolute top and to check out the other style of the game. But then you have the other in-game leaders who are very good at a different style. And the key thing about being the one who inherits the team is, look, just having the tools to win doesn't mean you will win. Like, it's not like half the job was done for you. But the difference is, how hard is it to win when you don't even know if you can win? You see, it's a different type of quest you're being given. The cool thing about being the Stanislaw Glaive in this analogy is you actually do know your team's capable of winning. In fact, when you join those teams, that's the dream, mate. You're walking in the door of an amazing lineup of players there that look like they're already ready to win. You've already seen them win on low level, perhaps, and your job is get them to the next level. That's no small feat, but at least you can conceive of how it could be possible. It's execution is what you have to do. The other guy has to have the vision. He has to build up. He has to see things that currently even the player himself he's going to work with doesn't see, or maybe doesn't even know is possible. I think that's just a different, one's almost like the dreamer, one's more just like the engineer. There's a different sort of skill set there, right? And to me, they are just totally different skill sets. So whether it's the in-game leader or whether it's the coach. So to me, it's kind of like with coaching styles. Like you have some coaches who are amazing with big stars. That's why Phil Jackson won so much in his career. Others are the best when you give them smaller pieces or pieces that are just going to be role players. I think that's what I would say people like Belichick or Popovich were like in NFL and NBA, respectively. I got them wrong way around on those two, obviously. To me, I think actually the silliest thing of all is, like I say, I don't think overall one is necessarily better than the other. In fact, you can even see how historically they actually, if you're an org, it can be valuable to have one and then the other. But I do, as I say, generally have a bias towards the builder because I think it's just a more wide-ranging skill set. And I also think it involves some of the rarest skill sets. Like, I think there are more good in-game leaders who could call a good game, do some good mid-rounds, have a basic playbook, interact with their stars, and if their players are good enough, win. I think there are more people like that than there are people who could come with nothing, like Daps is a great example, and just start with one of two throwaway pieces and then get a young player from here and then scout a guy from there and then and then suddenly you've got like a top 5 team in the world. I think that to me, you almost seem like a miracle worker there, mate. That really is like I gave you a straw and you went away on some Rumpelstiltskin shit and you've just made it into gold for me. The other guy, it's more like I gave him something pretty good and then he just like leveled it up 10%, which look, that might end up being the most important 10%, but it doesn't seem quite as epic, does it? I think this is just an awesome topic. I think this is a lens that it's not a totally very complicated one, but once you have it, just like I said with this new Na'Vi team, notice I've tried to apply it there. I've actually been very slow and withheld a lot of judgment. Whereas, for example, the new Cloud9 lineup, I'm actually pretty ruthless about them right out the gate because they're only changing a couple of players and a bunch of that lineup stayed the same. And two of the best players, in theory, with their roles set, are already there. They're already waiting for you. What are you waiting for? Like, trying to get going, mate. Nafani already built up all the rest for you. So that's why I'm trying to actually apply this overall. For many years of my career in esports, it really was just me. I did it all. I was the one person driving myself forwards. I didn't have people around me to help me. But actually, one thing I've learned over the years is the value of a support network, and mine is of course the Skrilluminati, my Patreon community. So this video, like many on my channel, was made possible by Ahmed Hadjou, Frisky, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Animosity, Bot Pounder 420, Jensen Goh, Tobias Bernasconi, Tosh, Thooorin, and as always, you know it, a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Do you want to ask a question for my regular AMA? Do you want to find out teasers? Who are the guests for the upcoming interviews? I often do. Maybe you want to be part of those long discussions where we can talk about whatever you want in esports. Well, if any of those tickle your fancy, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today. Support my content via the Patreon link in the description box below.